The US is finally suing Apple for being a monopoly. This is something that I am absolutely celebrating. Even though I am an Apple fan, I have three different MacBooks. I've gone through three MacBooks in 3 months. Mainly that's because I was misaligned with the devices that I had purchased earlier. But as you can see, I'm an Apple fan. I have an iPhone as well as two Android phones. But Apple is a terrible monopoly, and they are now actually being sued by the US government for being a monopoly. I think that this is long overdue. I think this is something that should have happened a long time ago. So I'm very grateful for it. I'm glad that they're finally suing them. Let's just go ahead and jump into the video.
Breaking news here on Apple out of the DOJ. Eamon Javers has it. Eamon?
Sarah, this is a civil antitrust lawsuit filed in the United States District Court for the District of New Jersey, and it alleges by the DOJ that Apple illegally maintains a monopoly over smartphones by selectively imposing contractual restrictions on and withholding critical access points from developers. The Department of Justice alleges Apple has broken the law, specifically Section 2 of the Sherman Antitrust Act, in 5 specific ways. One, by blocking innovative super apps. They say Apple has disrupted the growth of apps with broad functionality. The second is by suppressing mobile cloud streaming services. They say Apple blocked the development of cloud streaming apps and services that would allow consumers to enjoy what they call high-quality video games and other cloud-based applications without having to pay for expensive smartphone hardware. The third is by excluding cross-platform messaging apps. The Department of Justice says Apple has made the quality of cross-platform messaging worse, less innovative, and less secure for users so that its customers have to keep buying iPhones. The fourth is by diminishing the functionality of non-Apple smartwatches. Apple, they say, has limited the functionality of these third-party smartwatches so that users who purchase the Apple Watch face substantial out-of-pocket costs if they don't keep buying iPhones. And the fifth category here is limiting third-party digital wallets. They say Apple has prevented third-party apps from offering tap-to-pay functionality, inhibiting the creation of cross-platform third-party digital wallets, which, of course, is important in the whole paying ecosystem here. Now, the court process is expected to take months, if not years here. And guys, there's a political overlay to all of this, because if President Biden is to lose to Donald Trump in the fall, it's a Trump Department of Justice that could be in charge of handling the end game of this case, not a Biden one, depending on that election outcome. So it's not at all clear how that would play out, although some of the Trump people were involved in instigating this investigation into Apple in the first place back during the first Trump administration. So a lot of moving parts here, guys. But the Department of Justice now suing Apple on antitrust grounds. Back over to you.
Right. So they started looking into this in 2019 under the first Trump administration. And really, Eamon, it's part of a number of monopoly cases. Or David laughed at that. Yeah. The original Trump administration.
Are you predicting something already?
Nope, just stating facts. Eamon, the part of the other monopoly cases I was going to bring up against other big tech companies, Amazon, Alphabet, they've all been filed as well.
Yeah, and I think if you talk to the people at the Department of Justice, what folks involved here have told me is that they view this really as about the App Store, right? You've got Google and Android apps, and you've got Apple apps, and those two vectors are really the only way for every other company to get to market here. And there's a lot of concern on antitrust grounds that that's just not enough, that if those two companies control the gateway for apps to get through to consumers for every other company, ours included presumably, then they can exert monopolistic power over those apps. And there's a couple of reasons why Apple might want to do that, right? Because if you're in the business of selling expensive hardware like iPhones, you don't necessarily have an incentive to want apps that don't use the iPhone or use compute power that's bigger than what's available on the iPhone. So you think about cloud-based apps or AI-based apps or what they call super apps that use multiple apps within one and allow somebody else to be the gatekeeper there. All of that is something that Apple has an incentive to keep control over. But I think what we're looking at here, guys, is the very early stages now. We'll see the official announcement coming up shortly. And then the very early stages now of what will be a months and years long legal battle between Apple and the United States government.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. I mean, and you said it, years most likely, right? If history proves any guide here, given Microsoft and everything else.
Now, to be very clear regarding this, guys, What Apple has done is Apple is basically taxing the internet. So if you sign up for Netflix, you want to sign up for Netflix on an iPhone, Apple wants to get a 30% cut off that subscription. That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Apple will say, well, no, Netflix, you cannot use your own billing. You have to pay Apple to basically allow people to watch Netflix on an Apple device. And they'll say, no, that's not true, but realist. And okay, so how can people avoid that? Well, they can go to Netflix and they can download and they can, sign up on Netflix. Okay, can we tell people that they can do that? No, you can't tell them that they can do that either. So in other words, it's literally about taxing the internet. It's about taxing every service that exists. Apple wants a cut. If you make a payment, for a product, got to use Apple Wallet. If you're gonna buy essentially anything on the internet, any product or service, you know, Apple wants their piece of that. They want a piece of that, and it's very anti-consumer. I mean, could you imagine using a Mac, and being told that if you want to sign up for Netflix, you need to pay Apple's toll, to use to use Netflix on your computer, or if you want to use YouTube, gotta pay Apple. This is exactly what we're seeing on the iPhone, and it's not just that, it's so many different things. When we use Chrome, if you use Chrome on the iPhone, I didn't know this. However, Chrome is basically just an overlay on Safari. So you don't actually have a true Chrome browser on your iPhone the way that you would have on your Android phone. It's basically just an overlay on Safari, which is insanity in and of itself. So Apple will basically say, well, we won't even allow you to create your own app that uses your own code base. No, you can use the Safari architecture and then basically just overlay, basically just skin it. So it's Safari. So Chrome on Android, on iOS, is basically just Safari with a different skin on it. Like, bro, this is crazy. And then just messaging from iMessage, using iMessage versus sending messages to Android, it's a terrible experience because Apple has basically created a system where, if you don't have an iPhone, where they're going to make the experience so mediocre, they're going to make, emojis are not going to work properly and so forth, that they're going to basically force you into using iMessage if you want to actually get a message the way it's supposed to be sent. Like, this is levels of stupidity, absolute levels of stupidity. They found every possible way to keep people locked in the Apple ecosystem, and then there are idiots who are like, "Oh my gosh, well, you don't have to use iOS. You can go and use Android." The DOJ needs to find something else to do with their time, guys. There's so many sheep right now. The sheeple, like, we live in a society where sheeple are like, "Oh, leave it alone," because they are desperate to like, this is a form of I don't want to use the word ka and then ism, but it's like, guys, it's control. It's literal control. Like, there are modern people fighting in Western society today so that we are basically under the complete and utter control of the government and of companies. I've said this before already, that we live in a federal corporation. We do not live in a republic or democracy. We live in a federal corporation. And it's sickening what's happening, but it's just the reality of it. And these companies, they have to be held liable. Keep in mind, this is not just a situation with Apple. They're also, they filed lawsuits against Amazon and Alphabet as well. And this is extreme anti-competitive behavior. In the EU, Apple has now been forced to allow other stores to exist on the iPhone. And there are idiots who are like, "Oh, it's a security issue. Apple doesn't allow people to other companies to have their own stores on the iPhone because it's a security issue." That's the reason why you're only allowed to buy your stuff from Apple. These devices, these phones, they are computers, and they are the primary computers that most people use. And you only have two choices. You have Apple and you have Android, and that's it. And it's like people, I don't know, people are just fighting so hard to be under control, to be controlled by others, to have, so that, the government can control us or private corporations can control us. It's like they want our rights to be taken away, and they try to shame you when you say no. This is absolute bullshit. This is anti-competitive behavior. But yeah, guys, the US is finally suing Apple for being a monopoly. I'm all for it. I love my Apple products. I absolutely love them. But Apple needs to, this blocks innovation as well. Because when you do this, Apple has no reason to actually innovate. They're like, guys, if you haven't noticed, a lot of innovation at Apple has gone far down since the passing of Steve Jobs. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that Apple does not have to innovate anymore. Apple basically waits for the winners. They wait for someone else to develop the technology, and then they steal it and say and slap Apple on it. Apple doesn't have to be original anymore. Apple, because Apple does not have to compete. Those are my thoughts, guys. I want to know your thoughts on this. Let's talk about it in the comments. What do you think regarding this? I'm all for it that Apple is finally being sued and being targeted, and they're going after Apple for being a monopoly, and it needs to happen with Facebook, and it needs to happen with all these other social media companies like Alphabet. But anyway, guys, let me know your thoughts on it. Other tech companies, social media and tech companies. Yeah. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments. We'll talk about it there. Like the video if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you like the video, share the video. And just remember that all roads lead to MWA, men walking away. And cheers.